I want to return to the incident that you referenced a minute ago that occurred in Monterey, California in October 2017. At that time, you were still married to your second wife, correct?
I believe so.
And you had just fathered a child by a woman who would later become your third wife, correct?
Senator, I was falsely charged, fully investigated, and completely cleared.
So you think you were completely cleared because you committed no crime. That's your definition of cleared? You had just fathered a child 2 months before by a woman that was not your wife. I am shocked that you would stand here and say you're completely cleared. Can you so casually cheat on a second wife and cheat on the mother of a child that had been born 2 months before, and you tell us you are completely cleared?
Senator,
how is that a complete clear?
Senator, her child's name is Gwendolyn Hope Hegseth, and she's a child of God, and she's 7 years old.
And she was, and you cheated on the mother of that child less than 2 months after that daughter was born, didn't you?
Those were false charges.
Well,
it was fully investigated, and I was completely cleared. And I am so grateful for the marriage I have to this amazing woman behind me.
You've admitted that you had sex at that hotel in October 2017. You said it was consensual, isn't that correct?
Anything?
You've admitted that it was consensual, and you were still married, and you just had a child by another woman.
Again,
how do you explain your judgment?
Completely false charges against me.
You
fully investigated, and I was completely clear.
You have admitted that you had sex while you were married to wife 2 after you just had fathered a child by wife 3. You've admitted that. Now, if it had been a sexual assault, that would be disqualifying to be Secretary of Defense, wouldn't it?
It was a false claim then and a false claim now.
If it had been a sexual assault, that would be disqualifying to be Secretary of Defense, wouldn't it?
That was a false claim.
So you
talking about a hypothetical.
So you can't tell me whether someone who has committed a sexual assault is disqualified from being Secretary of Defense?
Senator, I know in my instance, and I'm talking about my instance only, it was a false claim.
But you acknowledge
you
acknowledge that you cheated on your wife and that you cheated on the woman by whom you had just fathered a child. You have admitted that.
I will allow your words to speak for themselves.
You're not retracting that today. That's good.
Mr. Secretary, I want to express my severe concern with the deployment of the National Guard in Los Angeles without consultation of the state of California. There have been photographs that have shown these troops sleeping on the floor and have not been provided fuel, food, or water by DOD. How long will this deployment last, and why were we unprepared to provide them basic necessities such as food and water?
The commanders and troops on the field are very well prepared, sir. They responded incredibly rapidly to a deteriorating situation with equipment and capabilities. We have made sure from the top down, as a Secretary of Defense who's been in a unit holding riot shields outside the White House during the chaos of the summer of 2020. I know what it's like to be immediately deployed into a situation like that. There are moments where you make do as best you can temporarily, but we are ensuring they're housed, fed, water capabilities in real time from my office, because I care that much about the California Guard and the Marines and the men and women who are supporting our ICE agents on the ground.
You should check
it's
with
true
office.
Every day, and that's a disingenuous attack that misrepresents how much we care about our troops and what they're doing to defend ICE agents. I'm not going to take the fact that we don't care about the troops. Nobody cares more about the troops at the top than this Secretary and the Chairman and our department.
How long will the deployment last?
We stated very publicly that it's 60 days. Because we want to ensure that those rioters, looters, and thugs on the other side assaulting our police officers know that we're not going anywhere. We're here to maintain the peace on behalf of law enforcement officers in Los Angeles, which Gavin Newsom won't do.
What is the estimated cost of the deployment for the Guard and the Marines to LA, and where's this funding coming from? Will it be coming from quality of life programs that affect our service members or our families? If you want to wait till I finish
before I hand it to
such as updates, housing, and barracks.
Before I hand it to Bryn, the insinuation that we're pulling money from housing and barracks in order to fund this is disingenuous and incorrect.
I'm just asking.
Bryn can give you the numbers, absolutely.
So the current estimated cost is $134 million, which is largely just TDY costs, travel, housing, food, et cetera.
Where's it coming from? That's the cost, but where's it coming from?
Out of their O&M accounts.
With the most recent deployment of the Marines, Mr. Secretary, what's the justification for using the military for civilian law enforcement purposes in LA? Why are you sending war fighters to cities to interact with civilians?
Every American citizen deserves to live in a community that's safe, and ICE agents need to be able to do their job. They're being attacked for doing their job, which is deporting illegal criminals. That should happen in any city, Minneapolis or Los Angeles. And if they're attacked, that's lawless, and President Trump believes in law and order. So he has every authority, and he has done mobilizing National Guard or active duty troops under U.S. code to protect federal agents in their job, which is exactly what we're doing, and we're proud to do it. We're proud to do it.
10 U.S.C. of the U.S. Code 12406 as a legal basis that the president used cites 3 examples and circumstances for the Guard: invasion by a foreign nation, rebellion or dangerous rebellion against the authority of the government of the United States, or the president is unable with regular forces to execute the laws of the United States. Which authority is triggered here to justify the use?
I don't know. You just read it yourself, and people can listen themselves, but it sounds like all 3 to me. If you've got millions of illegals and you don't know where they're coming from, they're waving flags from foreign countries and assaulting police officers and law enforcement officers, that's the problem.
The laws of the United States?
No, the governor of California is unable to execute the laws of the United States.
The president, you said all 3
governor
apply.
of the California has failed to protect his people, along with the mayor of Los Angeles, and so President Trump has said he will protect our agents, and our Guard and Marines are proud to do it.
The law also says, Mr. Secretary, that the orders for these purposes shall be issued through governors of the states.
You and I both know that President Trump has all the authorities necessary, and thankfully he's willing to do it on behalf of the citizens of Los Angeles, on behalf of our ICE agents, and behalf of our country.
We've also pulled $1 billion for the border as well. So this just goes into the same fund, 134. What did
Congressman, what's the
134 million? I was asking Ms. McDonald.
Okay.
134 million goes on top of the billion that's been pulled for the
So
border.
the funding that was pulled for this year was largely in FSRM, and in this budget, we're actually looking to plus that funding back up to backfill that for our troops and for their families.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Secretary Hegseth, as you probably know, today is National Women's Veterans Day. And in your confirmation hearing and in subsequent conversations, you've said, and I'm quoting you now, "Women in our military have and continue to make amazing contributions across all aspects of our battlefield, and that women were some of the best soldiers you served with." Do you still stand by those statements?
Yes.
Great. Thank you. As you probably know, I represent San Diego, the biggest military community in the country, so I meet with countless service members all the time. And with your focus on emphasis and on merit and standards, I wanted to tell you about 3 incredible women in our military. So the first woman is a major responsible for advanced collective warfighting training. Her officer evaluation report rates her as most qualified. And some of the comments included are, and I'm quoting now, "She lives the Army values and demonstrates the warrior ethos daily. She rates within the top 5% of officers I've encountered in 18 years of military service." The second woman is an aviator with a record of over 50 combat missions, including deployments to Iraq and Afghanistan. 2 quotes from her most recent fitness report in April include, quoting again, "People excel under her leadership, and she has my strongest possible recommendation for promotion." The third woman is an instructor for an Army ROTC battalion. According to her evaluation report, her overall performance was rated at far exceeds standards, and the comments include, "She is undoubtedly within the top 5% of non-commissioned officers I've worked with in my 22 years of service." Given their stellar qualifications and accomplishments and their record of surpassing standards, I assume that you agree that the Pentagon and the services should do everything they can to retain women like these, correct?
I would commend the major, the aviator, and the instructor for their service.
Great. I'm glad you agree, because I also believe we should be recruiting and retaining the very best and brightest in our country to serve in the military. And yet, you are actually kicking out these 3 highly qualified service members solely because of their identity. These are trans women. And you are using the very same arguments that have been used against desegregating the military or allowing women to serve or allowing gay people to serve. And in all those cases, those arguments were wrong. So I think it's clear that this is actually not about standards or, and I'm quoting you again, an equal, unwavering, gender-neutral, merit-based system, because if it were, you would be keeping these women in. Instead, you are the one injecting culture wars into the military, and it's at the detriment of our military readiness and national security. Now, General Kane, I'd like to turn to you.
So to be clear, these are men who think they're women.
These are women. I'm happy to educate you on
But these are men.
on trans
and so
issues at another
what we've
time.
identified is that there's mental health issues with that belief system.
I'd like to turn to
that
General
are
Kane
detrimental
now.
to readiness, and that's the determination that we've made and that we stand behind. Gender dysphoria.
And so you don't
complications.
trust your commanding officers to be able to evaluate the people under them to decide if that were true, wouldn't that show up in their fit reps? And yet these fit reps are from the last 3 months, and all of their commanding officers say that they exceed standards. I'm turning to General Kane now. General Kane, I'd like to touch on something you said yesterday before the Senate Appropriations Committee. When asked whether the United States is under a foreign invasion, you said, at this point in time, I don't see any foreign state-sponsored folks invading. Despite that testimony, 2,000 National Guard troops have been federalized and deployed to Los Angeles, and 700 Marines from my community of Southern California are now on the ground there as well. And on Tuesday, President Trump, flanked by hundreds of uniformed troops, said this is the reason they are there. They are there, I'm quoting now. Generations of Army heroes did not shed their blood on distant shores only to watch our country be destroyed by an invasion. General, have you personally informed the president that according to your own assessment, there is no invasion?
Ma'am, first, the definition of an invasion, whether or not that's a policy, that's really a policy decision. And, from a military-only perspective, I, stand by what I said yesterday. But, my advice to the president in any particular matter from a security standpoint, or for the secretary for that matter, I keep that between them.
I understand that, but the highest-ranking military advisor in the country does not believe there is an invasion, and yet the President of the United States is federalizing the National Guard and deploying
Gentlelady's time's expired.
in the name of an
Gentlelady's time's expired.
The main person who was involved in this thread that a lot of people want to talk to is Secretary of Defense Hegseth. And a lot of questions were brought up regarding his drinking habits in his confirmation hearing. To your knowledge, do you know whether Pete Hegseth had been drinking before he leaked classified information?
I don't have any knowledge of Secretary Hegseth's personal habits.
Director Radcliffe, same question. Yes or no?
No, I'm going to answer that. I think that's an offensive line of questioning. The answer is no. I find it interesting that you want to. I'm going to answer. You asked me a question. You want an answer?
No, listen.
You don't want to focus on the good work that the CIA is doing, that the intelligence community.
Director, I reclaim my time. Director, I reclaim my time. Here, I have huge respect for the CIA, huge respect for our men and women in uniform. But this was a question that's on the top of minds of every American, right? He stood in front of a podium in Europe holding a drink. So of course, we want to know if his performance is compromised. If people were asking if the General Austin was compromised because of a heart issue,
was his performance compromised because of a successful strike?
I yield back, Mr. I bring my.
You want to know?
You
want to talk about accepting responsibility? Do you think you should accept responsibility for a successful strike to make Americans safer? You want to focus on?
I reclaim my time. So here's the thing. This is serious. As somebody, we've been briefed in this committee about using Signal. One of the things they basically said, the most secure phone call, the least secure text messaging. And we know that your people are Russians, Chinese are on your phone.
Gentleman's time's expired.
Your failures, Mr. Secretary, since you've taken office has been staggering. You sent classified operational information over Signal to chest thump in front of your wife, who, by the way, has no security clearance, risking service member lives in the process. You blew the $1 billion fight against the Houthis, whom, again, as my colleague says, has no Navy, and yet you lost all of those aircraft. You've created such a hostile command environment that no one wants to serve as your chief of staff or work with you in other senior DoD leadership roles. But what we should all be talking about more than all of this is that you have an unjustified, un-American misuse of the military in American cities, pulling resources and attention away from core missions to the detriment of the country, the war fighters, and yes, the war fighting that you claim to love. I don't know if this is because you are too inexperienced and incompetent to understand the real threats facing our country, or if it's because you are just an unqualified yes man who can't tell the president how to keep Americans safe. You are focusing on renaming basis for Confederate generals. You said just now to Senator King that to a man and to a woman, we would rather be associated with the old Confederate names. Well, I am one of those women. I served at Fort Rucker, Alabama, a base that was named for a traitor who took arms against the United States of America, led troops who killed Americans. It was renamed for Mike Novosel, a Medal of Honor recipient who, in his citation for the Medal of Honor, includes that he saved 29 American lives, to include hovering backwards in a helicopter towards an enemy bunker where a wounded American was laying and saved that person, including after being taken fire himself. I know a little something about what it takes to fly a helicopter when you've been hit by enemy fire. That was heroic. I'd rather be associated with Mike Novosel than a failed Confederate traitor. I don't know whether you are inexperienced or too incompetent, but I wonder when you will actually focus on our nation's warfighting mission. We know that California is just a deliberate, systematic, political and dangerous campaign led by you. We should not be using our military to play cops against Americans. General Kane, as chairman, a key part of your job is to coordinate military planning across the joint force. Is the department currently incorporating into any military plans expanding the use of the reserve forces to include the National Guard or active duty troops to support domestic law enforcement, including in other locations in the United States?
Senator, you know, we carefully.
No, General.
Well, it's not really a yes or no question, Madam Senator. We plan all kinds of different things.
I think it is a yes or no question.
I'm not aware of anything, but the reason why I'm answering is the tags may be looking at something that I'm not aware of.
What are you doing at your level? You're not aware of that happening at your level? Because we know that on his first day, President Trump directed U.S. Northern Command to revise its unified command plan to add new planning requirements to combat, and I quote, criminal activities. A series of follow-up executive orders continue to redirect DOD priorities to supporting domestic law enforcement, including one in April that tells DOD, and I quote, use national security assets for law and order. In other words, do law enforcement's job. I'd like to enter these executive orders into the record, Mr. Chairman.
Is there objection? Without objection, so ordered.
Supervisory Hegseth, you say you are focused on warfighting and warriors. These are your words. Yet you are diverting untold DOD resources and attention to fundamentally non-military mission of domestic policing. Across the country, we have qualified police officers who are trained for that mission. They know those streets better than the Marines you deploy to Los Angeles, who normally focus on the Indo-Pacific. And you recently approved 700 more troops in 3 other states to do admin and logistics works for ICE. You say all of this is valuable training, but I would much rather have our troops do tough, realistic training relevant to high-end combat. Instead of typing in spreadsheets for ICE, they should be conducting live fire maneuver exercises. Instead of patrolling American neighborhoods and standing in front of federal buildings, they should be rehearsing call for fire missions. We have local police who can stand in front of those federal buildings. And the list of distractions goes on. You are encouraging the DOD workforce to go work for DHS in increasing numbers. You're pulling the military away from facing foreign enemies who literally say things like death to America. And you're putting troops with weapons aimed at Americans. Mr. Secretary, let the military get back to its real job. Stop forcing them to do DHSs. And if you want to be DHS Secretary, maybe you can apply for that job when you're fired from this one due to your incompetence.
The senator's time has expired. Senator Budd.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you all for being here.
Mr. Secretary, earlier this month, you announced a plan to change the name of 3 Virginia military bases to restore the names of Confederate-era generals on those bases. You researched to find brave American soldiers with the same last names, Lee, Hill, and Pickett, who had not fought for the Confederacy and declared that those Confederate adjacent names would be restored. The problem is that you had to strip away the names of 4 amazing people that the Pentagon and local communities had chosen to honor at the Virginia bases. Van Barfoot, he was a Mississippi native, Mr. Chair, who came to Fort Pickett in the early 40s to train for war. He fought all over Europe in World War II. He won the Congressional Medal of Honor for his bravery, Leading his platoon in southern Italy, he killed 10 of the enemy, captured 17 more, and escorted 2 wounded Americans 1,700 yards to safety under enemy fire. Stayed in the Army for another 34 years, seeing action in both the Korean and the Vietnam Wars, and being assigned as the Army liaison to the Virginia National Guard at Fort Pickett. Long after he retired, he maintained his tie to the fort and to the Virginia National Guard. I was at the naming ceremony, where this base, to which he had devoted much of his life, was named in his honor. His family was there, and they were so proud. Arthur Gregg served in the Army for more than 30 years, first African-American to reach the rank of brigadier general, first to reach the rank of lieutenant general, began as an enlisted, eventually decided to become a commissioned officer, went to Fort Lee for quartermaster training, quickly rose through the ranks as an instructor, even though he was not allowed to go to the officers' club because of the color of his skin. He finished his career in 1979 as the director of all Army logistics operations around the world. He stayed near Fort Lee in retirement, raised his family there, and was a continuous beloved presence until his death last summer at 96. He was actually at the renaming ceremony with his family in 2022 at this place that meant so much to him. Charity Adams. Charity Adams was an Army officer during World War II, the first African-American woman allowed to join the WACs. She was the commanding officer of the 6888th Central Postal Directory Battalion, a unique battalion composed primarily of African-American women making sure that American GIs in Europe got their mail during World War II. Our colleagues Jackie Rosen and Jerry Moran successfully passed a bill in 2022 giving the 6888 the Congressional Gold Medal. Charity Adams was the highest-ranking African-American woman in the military at the end of World War II. Her family was at the dedication of Fort Gregg Adams, named in honor of these 2 trailblazing logistics leaders. They were so proud. Finally, Mary Walker, the only woman ever to receive the Congressional Medal of Honor. She graduated from Syracuse Medical School in 1855. She tried to join the Union Army as a surgeon, was turned away because she was a woman. But the need was so great, she eventually got hired at a military hospital in Washington and then was deployed as an Army surgeon with the Army of the Cumberland and the 52nd Ohio Infantry, becoming the first female surgeon in the U.S. Army. She served all over Virginia, including the place where the base is now named after her. She frequently crossed battle lines to treat civilians and even treated Confederate soldiers. She was captured a prisoner of war in Richmond until a prisoner relief president, Andrew Johnson, gave her the Congressional Medal of Honor after the Civil War. Why did you decide that these 4 patriots were not worthy enough to have their names on a base?
Well, Senator, as you know, this was never about the names of the bases they were renamed to.
So you don't challenge the worthiness?
Restoring all bases to their original
to the
name,
Confederate
because we're not
names.
about erasing
Okay,
history.
you don't care about their military record. You wanted to restore the Confederate names. When you called the Gregg family to tell them that their dad's name was no longer going to be on the base, what was their reaction?
Senator, the Army notified them of that.
You didn't call any of the families, and I've spoken with the families, and the families were called by the press. That's how they learned about this. They learned about it from the press. You didn't call the Barfoot family, the Gregg family, and you didn't call the Adams family. I told the families I'd ask you about this today. In fact, 2 of General Gregg's granddaughters, Avery and Sydney, are right here in the audience, and I want to ask you this as I close. While you announced that these brave men and women's names would be stripped from the Virginia bases, no orders to that effect have been received by the base commanders. In light of the patriotic service of Van Barfoot, Arthur Gregg, Charity Adams, and Mary Walker, I'd like to ask you simply not to issue the orders changing the names of these Virginia bases. These families, my Commonwealth, are very proud of these heroes, very satisfied with these names, and ask you not to change them. Will you honor these exemplary patriots and keep their worthy names in places on the bases they loved and where they served?
Well, Senator, we very much thank and appreciate them for their service, and we'll find ways to recognize them, but the orders will soon be going to those bases to change the names back to the original name that never should have been changed.
But you have the power to not send those orders. They haven't gone out yet, correct?
Thank you. Senator, your time has expired.
I'm somewhat puzzled. I grew up in Virginia where Robert E. Lee was revered. I think when I was a kid, his birthday was a school holiday. But as I grew older and learned more about American history, I learned that he fit the classic definition of a traitor. He took up arms against his country. He broke his oath as a member of the United States Army, which he took upon entering his career at West Point. Why are you going through these incredible gymnastics, finding current soldiers or other soldiers to rename? And you slipped a minute ago. You said we're returning these bases to their original names. Robert E. Lee, leading general of the Confederacy, Pickett, the other names. Why are you doing this? I don't understand what the motivation is to rename bases for people who took up arms against their country on behalf of slavery. What possible motivation can there be for this? Who is telling you to do this? Who is urging you to do this?
Senator, the veterans and service members across the country who have deployed from Fort Bragg or Fort Benning or Fort Hood or Fort Pickett, there's a legacy, there's a connection to those bases and to those places, to what they trained for there, what they did for, and what they came home back to. That matters to them. Ask enough of them, as I do, all the time, before and later. And we recognize the service of those who were put into the replacement. No one's disputing that. I would never dispute that. What we're looking at is erasing history, erasing names, erasing base names that service members are tied to.
Not
Talk to people that serve at Bragg.
Recognizing
Ask people that
history.
serve at Fort Bragg or Fort Benning if they like the fact that the names have been returned. And to a man and to a woman, they will tell you, thank God we're back to Fort Bragg, and thank God we're back. And thankfully, because so many men and women in this country have served, there's a Benning and a Bragg and a Pickett and a Hood has a Silver Star or a Medal of Honor that we could rename the base to because of the limits of what Congress allowed us to do. So this is something we've been proud to do, something that's important for the morale of the Army, and those communities appreciate that we've returned it back to what it was instead of trying to play this game of erasing names.
We're not erasing history, Mr. Secretary. We're recognizing history and recognizing that mistakes have been made in this country. The greatest of all was the Civil War, where people took up arms against their country on behalf of the institution of slavery. And to continue the practice of recognizing those people and honoring them by the naming of these bases is, I believe, an insult to the people of the United States.
I assume that in each of your weddings, you've pledged to be faithful to your wife. You've taken an oath to do that, haven't you?
Senator, as I've acknowledged to everyone in this committee, not a perfect person, not claiming to be.
But no, I just asked a simple question. You've taken an oath like you would take an oath to be Secretary of Defense in all of your weddings to be faithful to your wife. Is that correct?
I have failed in things in my life, and thankfully I'm redeemed by my Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ.
In finalizing divorces from your first and second wives, were there non-disclosure agreements in connection with those divorces?
Senator, not that I'm aware of.
If there were, would you agree to release those first and second wives from any confidentiality agreement?
Senator, it's not something I'm aware of.
But if there were, you would agree to release them from a confidentiality agreement?
Senator, that's not my responsibility.
Did you ever engage in any acts of physical violence against any of your wives?
Senator, absolutely not.
But you would agree with me that if someone had committed physical violence against a spouse, that would be disqualifying to serve as Secretary of Defense, correct?
Senator, absolutely not have I ever done that.
You would agree that that would be a disqualifying offense, would you not?
Senator, you're talking about a hypothetical.
I don't think it's a hypothetical. Violence against spouses occurs every day. And if you as a leader are not capable of saying that physical violence against a spouse should be a disqualifying fact for being Secretary of the most powerful nation in the world, you're demonstrating an astonishing lack of judgment. The incident in Monterey led to a criminal charge, a criminal investigation, a private settlement, and a cash payment to the woman who filed the complaint. And there was also a non-disclosure agreement, correct?
It was a confidential settlement agreement off of a nuisance lawsuit.
Right. During an interview, you claimed that you settled the matter because you were worried that if it became public, it might hurt your career. Do you maintain that you were blackmailed?
Senator, I maintain that false claims were made against me. And ultimately,
your attorney
those
used
false
the
claims,
frame.
I have the opportunity to attest my innocence in those false claims.
But you didn't reveal any of this to President Trump or the transition team as they were considering you to be nominated for Secretary of Defense. You didn't reveal the action. You didn't reveal the criminal complaint. You didn't reveal the criminal investigation. You didn't reveal the settlement. You didn't reveal the cash payment. Why didn't you inform the commander-in-chief and the transition team of this very relevant event?
Senator, I've appreciated every part of the process with the transition team. They have been open and honest with me. We've had great conversations between the two of us, and I appreciate the opportunity that President-elect Trump has given me.
You chose not to reveal this, right? Because you knew it would hurt your chances. So you chose not to reveal this really important thing to the commander-in-chief and the transition team because you were worried about your chances rather than trying to be candid with the future president of the United States. Are there any other important facts that you chose not to reveal to the president-elect and his team as they were considering you to be Secretary of Defense?
Senator, I sit here before you an open book, as everyone who's watched this process.
With multiple non-disclosure and confidentiality agreements tying the hands of many people who would like to comment to us. Much has been made of your workplace behavior as a leader of nonprofit veterans organizations and as a Fox News contributor. Were you fired from either of the leadership positions with the nonprofits?
I was the leader. I was the CEO of Veterans for America and the executive director of Vets for Freedom.
Were you fired from either
And I was
of them?
never fired from a veterans organization.
Do you have non-disclosure agreements with either of those organizations?
Not that I'm aware of, Senator.
Many of your work colleagues have said that you show up for work under the influence of alcohol or drunk. I know you've denied that, but you would agree with me, right, that if that was the case, that would be disqualifying for somebody to be Secretary of Defense.
Senator, those are all anonymous false claims, and the totality
they're not anonymous.
The letters on the record here.
They're not anonymous.
On the record, people
we've seen records with names
Vets
attached
for Freedom,
to them.
Concerned Vets for America, and Fox News attributing to me
one of your colleagues
working
said,
hard every day on behalf of
One of
my
your
mission.
colleagues said that you got drunk at an event at a bar and chanted, "Kill all Muslims." Another colleague, not anonymous, we have this, said that you took coworkers to a strip club. You were drunk, you tried to dance with strippers, you had to be held off the stage, and one of your employees in that event filed a sexual harassment charge as a result of it. Now, I know you denied these things, but isn't that the kind of behavior that, if true, would be disqualifying for somebody to be Secretary of Defense?
Senator, anonymous false charges.
They're not anonymous. And I'll just conclude and say this to the chairman. You claim that this was all anonymous. We have seen records with names attached to all of these, including the name of your own mother. So don't make this into some anonymous press thing. We have seen multiple names of colleagues consistently throughout your career that have talked about your abusive actions,
Chairman,
attitudes,
I think he's
words,
over
and
his time.
statements
He's way
to women.
over his time.
I now yield.
And thank you very much. I now ask unanimous consent to enter into the record a family court order concerning the appointment of parenting time between Mr. Hegseth and Mrs. Samantha Hegseth. It states that there were no claims of domestic abuse or probable evidence of abuse in the relationship. Without objection, that will be added to the record. Senator Duckworth, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And also, Secretary Matters had to have this waiver as well. Mr. Hegseth, this hearing is about whether you are qualified to be Secretary of Defense, and one of the qualifications, to answer my colleague's question, is to actually win the votes of every member of this committee and to be confirmed by the United States Senate. And you need to convince us that you're worthy of that vote, because the people of the state of Illinois voted for me to be their senator so that I could cast that vote when it comes to picking who is going to be the next Secretary of Defense. This hearing now seems to be a hearing about whether or not women are qualified to serve in combat, and not about whether or not you are qualified to be Secretary of Defense. And let me just say that the American people need a SecDef who's ready to lead on day one. You are not that person. Our adversaries watch closely during times of transition, and any sense that the Department of Defense that keeps us safe is being steered by someone who's wholly unprepared for the job puts America at risk, and I am not willing to do that. With that in mind, Mr. Hegseth, I want you to try to explain to the American people, this committee, who have to vote for you, and to our troops who are deployed around the world, why you are qualified to lead the Department of Defense. We already know that you've only led as large as a 200-person organization. We already know that you so badly mangled a budget that after you left, they had to bring in a forensic accountant to figure out what went wrong. And that the largest budget you ever managed was about $18 billion. You know, that is about 51,560 times lower than the Department of Defense budget of $825 billion. $16 million is 51,568 times smaller than the defense budget. Please describe to me, Mr. Hegseth, you talk about DOD passing an audit. Please describe to me a time or an organization when that you led underwent an audit, because you say you're going to hire smarter people than you to run this audit. I'm not asking you to be an accountant. I want you to be able to tell me what kind of guidance will be given to those employees, what will happen whether or not you pass that audit. Have you led an audit of any organization, yes or no? I don't want a long answer, yes or no. Have you led an audit of any organization of which you were in charge?
Senator, in both of the organizations I ran, we were always completely fiscally responsible.
Yes or
with the
no,
money
did
that
you
we
lead
had.
an audit?
And the way
yes
my
or
leadership
no,
has
did you lead
been
an audit?
stated
Yes or
has
no?
been completely
What are you afraid of? You
mischaracterized.
can't answer this question. Yes or no, did you lead an audit? Do you not know this answer?
Senator, every
Yes or
part
no?
of my leadership
Yes
of these
or no?
organizations
Yes
has
or
been
no, did you lead an audit?
misrepresented
I will
from
take
top
that as
to
a
bottom.
no. What were the findings? So there were no findings because you've never led an audit. What guidance did you give the auditors? None, because you've never led an audit. Nobody expects you to be an accountant, Mr. Hegseth. What we expect is for you to understand the complexity of this Pentagon budget process that is absolutely necessary to outfit our warfighters. Look, the Secretary of Defense is required to make quick decisions every single day with high-level information that's being provided for them. A Secretary of Defense has to have breadth and depth of knowledge. Right now, I am concerned that you have neither. Mr. Hegseth, what is the highest level of international negotiations that you have engaged in, that you have led in? Because the Secretary of Defense does lead international security negotiations. There are three main ones that the Secretary of Defense leads and signs. Can you name at least one of them?
Could you repeat the question, Senator?
Sure. What is the highest level of international security agreement that you have led? And can you name some that the Secretary of Defense would lead? There's three main ones. Do you know?
I have not been involved in international security arrangements because I have not been in government other
Okay.
than serving in the military. So my job has been to
So no, the
lead
answer is no.
men and
Can you
women in
name one of the
combat.
three main ones that the
You're
Secretary
talking
of
about
Defense
defense
signs?
arrangements. I mean, NATO might be one that you're referring to.
Status of Forces Agreement would be one of them.
Status of Forces Agreement. I've been a part of teaching
So-
about Status of Forces Agreements.
But you don't
inside
remember to
Afghanistan.
mention it? You're not qualified, Mr. Hegseth. You're not qualified. You talk about repairing our defense industrial complex. You're not qualified to that. You could do acquisition and cross-servicing agreements, which essentially are security agreements. You can't even mention that. You've done none of those. You talked about the Indo-Pacific a little bit, and I'm glad that you mentioned it. Can you name the importance of at least one of the nations in the ASEAN, and what type of agreement we have with at least one of those nations? And how many nations are in ASEAN, by the way?
I couldn't tell you the exact
No, you
amount of
couldn't,
nations
because
in
you've
that,
not
but I
even
know we have
bothered to
allies
do-
in South Korea and Japan and in AUKUS with Australia, trying to work
Okay.
on submarines with them.
Mr.
and data
Hegseth,
transfers
none
with
of those
them.
countries
We
are
have
in
allies
ASEAN.
across.
None of those three countries that you've mentioned are in ASEAN. I suggest you do a little homework before you prepare for these types of negotiations. Listen, Mr. Hegseth, we ask our troops to go into harm's way all the time. We ask them to go into harm's way. And this behind me is a copy of the Soldier's Creed, a copy that usually hangs over my desk here in the Senate, and you should be familiar with it. It's the same copy that hung over my desk at Walter Reed every single day that I woke up and fought my way back because I wanted to go back and serve next to my buddies who'd saved my life. This same copy, these words are repeated over and over and over again. And let me read out two things to you, two sentences. I will always place the mission first, and I am disciplined, physically and mentally tough, trained and proficient in my warrior task. Mr. Hegseth, our troops follow these words every single day, and they man up and they pack their rucksacks and they go to war. And they deserve a leader who can lead them, not a leader who wants to lower the standards for himself or raising the standards for other people. And by the way, our troops already meet the standards. We ask troops to man that ship, fight that fire, fly that helicopter until their very last breath. And they do that every single day. They cannot be led by someone who's not competent to do the job. How can we ask these warriors to train and perform the absolute highest standards when you are asking us to lower the standards to make you the Secretary of Defense simply because you are buddies with our president-elect? And by the way, he has filed for bankruptcy 6 times. I'm not quite sure he's the kind of CEO you want to refer to as a successful businessman. Let me make it clear. You can't seem to grasp that there is no U.S. military as we know it without the incredible women that we serve. Women who've earned their place in their units. You have not earned your place as Secretary of Defense. You say you care about keeping our armed forces strong and that you like that our armed forces are meritocracy, then let's not lower the standards for you. You, sir, are a no-go at this station.
Thank you, Senator Duckworth. I would like to submit for the record a letter submitted by Mr. Brian Marriott that says, anyone who would claim that Pete mismanaged funds at Vets for Freedom is ignorant of the facts. Without objection, it will be admitted to the record. Senator Budd.
By any objective measure, the Pentagon under Pete Hegseth's leadership is an unprecedented train wreck. I won't repeat all the egregious acts that have been shared multiple times over in this hearing, but I will say this: none of this is normal. None of this is right. Every new revelation exposes yet another instance of shocking and gross incompetence from the Secretary of Defense. And each time we do nothing but reward him with more money, we are complicit. And while Pete Hegseth scours the Pentagons for leakers, hoping that each new day doesn't yield yet another horrible news story because he's clearly trying to fake it till he makes it, the American people are right there with him because it's their friends and families, their livelihoods, our national security on the line. Nothing we have seen in the past 3 months leads me to believe that this Secretary of Defense has the leadership and managerial skills, the judgment, or the executive temperament to run the Pentagon. Worse, he is normalizing a dangerous culture of practice where retribution, security breaches, firing, and attrition through intimidation is both commonplace and acceptable. It's fair to say that the mistakes he has made on the job more than justify his immediate dismissal, because our service members and their families deserve better. The President of the United States deserves better. Our nation deserves better than what Pete Hegseth has offered us so far. If President Trump refuses to hold his own Secretary of Defense accountable, even as his administration purges thousands of federal employees who do have the skills, the judgment, and the temperament to do their jobs, then clearly Congress must step in. This amendment is simple and necessary. Secretary Hegseth clearly doesn't know how to do his job. We need to make him get his act together by putting him and his entire Senate-confirmed leadership team through a managerial and supervisory training program that makes clear what's right and what's wrong. This is not a radical idea, nor is this any kind of harsh punishment. Millions of Americans every day go through similar trainings on a regular basis. Employees who are not delivering on their job, unable to do their job, are often put on performance improvement plans and tasked with completing these kinds of trainings so they can actually get the job done. This amendment is also about fiscal responsibility. We should not be giving anyone the authority to spend an additional $150 billion on top of the over $850 billion in DOD's discretionary budget with as little oversight and accountability as my Republican colleagues are proposing today. Least of all, someone who has proven to be so incapable of serving as Secretary of Defense right now. If Republicans are going to give Secretary Hegseth this sort of virtually unchecked spending authority, a blank check paid for by taxpayers, taken literally from food money and Medicaid, then we should all demand oversight in who wields these funds. And we have to make sure he does his job in a way that does not compromise our national security. No matter what party is in charge, we all want and should demand a Secretary of Defense that will succeed and keep us safe. When they do, our nation is stronger and we are safer. While I will continue to have significant disagreements with this administration and their national security policy, I and countless millions of Americans need, deserve, demand to know that our Secretary of Defense is willing to admit when they've made a mistake or exhibited a severe lack of judgment and is willing to accept corrective action and guidance on how to do their job right. To vote no is to be both complicit and approving of the gross incompetence of the Secretary and is a danger to this country's national security, promoting a culture of chaos that they are establishing right now at the Pentagon. To vote no is to accept responsibility and to be culpable for Pete Hegseth's behavior as is unchecked. I urge my colleagues to support this amendment and to vote yes. I yield back.
Generally yields back, Chair, and recognizes himself. This amendment requires basic security information training already prescribed by law and regulations. Everyone with a clearance is briefed on proper handling of classified information and must sign an appropriate oath. The amendment has no practical effect and seeks to hold hostage nearly $40 billion for defense modernization. I urge our members to oppose it.